Hello, this video will provide students with an overview of the core academic skills for educators writing subtest. We're going to take a look at the Praxis Study Companion. It is 70 pages if you take a look up here. And I'm going to be pointing out some of the key information that I think is most important for students to keep in mind as they kind of expose themselves to what they are going to grapple with on this assessment. So as I scroll on down, you're going to see that there's a lot of information that definitely take a look at, but I want to focus right here on what this test is going to be assessing. So at a glance, this test currently has the code 5722. You'll see that this test is 100 minutes divided into a 40-minute selected response section and then two 30-minute essays. You'll see right here that there are a number of questions. There are 40 selected response questions and just 40 minutes. So essentially you have 1 minute per selected response question. And then you will have two questions at 30 minutes each. So 1 full hour of essay writing on this test. For the context categories, how it breaks down is that you have text types, purposes, and production, which will be about 6 to 12 selected responses, and the two essays under 60% of your score. And then language and research skills for writing will be 28 to 34 selected response, which will be 40% of your score. So as you can see, when it comes to the essays and then some of the selected responses, when it comes to text types, purposes, and production, we're definitely going to want to put some emphasis into those essays. You'll see that there is a breakdown, and if you add the lowest number of like the text types and the highest number of the language, you're going to see that these both equal 40. So what that basically means is that you don't ever know which version of the test you're going to receive and how many of each types of questions you are going to complete. When you keep on scrolling down, you're going to see what the breakdown of each of these types of content areas are. So when we take a look at the section that's worth 60%, the text types, purposes, and production goes into writing arguments, and we will have an entire narrated PowerPoint about how you will go about forming your argument and then writing that essay in 30 minutes. Essentially, all you're looking to do is write clearly and coherently. The main issue with most of my students is that they say that it's 30 minutes, and that's one of the hardest things that they work with. The second essay is called the informative or explanatory text. Sometimes you call that the source-based essay. It really depends on what book or who you're speaking to. But really all you're doing is taking two separate essays that have been provided by ETS. You're going to read them and you're going to synthesize the information. You're going to convey your information clearly and accurately by organizing the details and selecting details from the essay. You'll cite the information and you will basically write a paraphrase / summary of the two essays of the key details. When it comes to the selected response, you're going to have to revise some sentences to see if anything needs to be edited for style, if there's anything that's incorrect with vocabulary, consistency, and tone. And that essentially is going to complete all of the section 1 when it comes to the, let's scroll on up, text types, purposes, and production. So that's 60%. The two essays and then questions on revision. Now let's take a look at the second part that you're going to be taking a look at. Here we go, which is language and research skills for writing. You're going to look at grammar, grammatical relationships. Now think about when the last time you thought about shifts in verb tense, pronouns, noun-noun agreement, adjectives and adverbs. All of this content we need to revisit and dust off those cobwebs. Then we have structural relationships when it comes to misplaced and dangling modifiers, fragments, run-ons, parallel structure. We have within the course shell various modules that can help you review these, because I'm sure a bunch of you right now are scratching your head and saying, dangling modifier, what the heck is that? We will help you go through this and to really reactivate that background knowledge. Word choice when it comes to either redundancy or wrong usage of words. And then, of course, we have no error. So sometimes you have to identify maybe a sentence doesn't necessarily sound correct because it's not written using like colloquial language, because we're so used to how we speak that we read it and we're like, I think this is wrong. But we'll help you kind of identify what a accurate, perfect sentence that identifies the conventions of standard English looks like. Then there's going to be some questions on mechanics, which is capitalization, punctuation, commas, semicolons, and then research skills. Research skills is a really interesting component because it's going to ask you to look at the credibility of resources, look at the difference between primary and secondary sources, use some research strategies, and to identify if papers and books are cited correctly. So truly, that's the end of the content that you're going to have to kind of refamiliarize yourself with the Praxis Core writing subtest. Now, what you're going to have to recognize is that there are computer-delivered questions, and this is those multiple choice slash selected response. So in some of these, you're going to have to click more than one oval. You might have to type in an entry box, but I have to absolutely tell you, for most of the questions that I have seen when it comes to the Praxis Core writing, you're truly just selecting very quick responses. You're just hitting maybe one button. We're going to take a look at what those look like. So, for example, here's an example of a selected response. Many selected response questions begin with the phrase, which of the following? Here's an example. Which of the following is a flavor made from beans? Strawberry, cherry, vanilla, or mint. So you would pretty much take a look at this and we can pretty much identify that the flavor made from beans is only going to be vanilla, and then you are only going to choose one answer. But then when it comes to some more complicated examples, you're going to see things that might require you to really think deeply about the question. So for example, entries and outlines are generally arranged according to which of the following relationships of ideas. So now we're going to reactivate that knowledge, think about outlines. Are we talking about literal and inferential, concrete, abstract, linear, recursive, or main and subordinate? And if you have to think about it, what this really says is how are outlines typically organized? And when you think of kind of putting the test taker's language in your own words, you'll recognize that it's main and subordinate if we think of your typical linear style outline. We're just going to kind of scroll on down and we're going to see that we're kind of rapidly going through this content. We have some various sample questions. I like these sample questions because what they do for you is just kind of provide an example of what the Praxis actual computer is going to look like. This is an example of a great example of a selected response question. We have these within the module, not necessarily these, so I'm not going to go through them, but I just want to expose to you what these questions are going to potentially look like. Here with usage, you're going to have to choose on the section that is incorrect and must be revised. If you think it's okay, then your answer would simply be E, no error. When it comes to the sentence correction questions, you are going to see a section that's going to be underlined, and that is the section that is going to be in question. Like, do we need to rephrase this? Is there something incorrect? And you will see that the first response is always going to be identical to the prompt or to the question that's underlined, meaning that's almost like saying no problem, no error. That would be A, and then you would put the rest of them in to determine which would be the accurate answer. Scrolling on down for revision in context, sometimes you're going to see a really decent sized essay. So here you're going to see that they've identified each of the sentences. So sentence 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. So they've done that for you because they're going to ask you to go to sentence 5 and to determine what the best version of the underlined sentence would be or should be. So instead of therefore, should we be using however, in fact, in effect, or to be clear? And A, as it says, as it is now, is essentially stating no error. Sometimes you're going to see that they take a section of 6 and 7 right here, right? Instead of out of curiosity, she visited a zoo. At the zoo, she was immediately drawn to the elephants. So you'll see that they're looking to either combine these two sentences and to make it a more complex sentence, or again, leave it alone. And you can see, oh, I am lying to you. They are not going to be leaving this one alone. So you're going to have to choose the best response and how you can revise and combine these sentences. Scrolling down, the rest of them are pretty similar as to, just kind of choosing the correct answer. Here's a research question for you, which is the main purpose of reviewing the references in a research article when one writes an academic paper. So really you're just going through all of the learning that you've done in college and in high school when you're choosing your articles, when you're choosing to determine if you want to use an article on an academic paper. Why are you reviewing the references? Pretty simple stuff. Within the 70 pages that ETS provides, they give you answers to sample questions. I sincerely suggest that you review this on your own time, just kind of go through it. And then they also gave you some rubrics and what the holistic scoring looks like for each of the essays. Again, we go through this in great detail individually and independently of each other because these essays are so worthy of attention due to the fact that they are weighted so heavy on your grade. So this is going to conclude what the Praxis Core Writing for Test Takers looks like. This is a review of the Core Academic Skills for Educators Writing Study Companion. I hope that this has been a valuable use of 11 minutes of your time, but again, please consider printing this out and reviewing this well before you complete your own Praxis Writing Core test. Thank you.